everybody, and welcome back to my channel. So happy to have you here with us today. I am doing a book review today in honor of my Moonbeam patrons over my Patreon. You know the drill. I will leave all the information about Patreon down in the description box for you, just in case you hadn't checked out this amazing website just yet. So today, as a result of the Moonbeam patron poll, every month my Moonbeams get to kind of choose what video they would like to see based on a poll, and they wanted to have a review of this book, which is Relics by Tim Lebbon. I shall push that up closer to the camera for you there. Okay, so this is a fantasy, kind of urban fantasy horror novel by a horror novelist. Tim Lebbon is actually the guy he's been sort of he has been tapped to write the novel adaptations for several movies you may have heard of, including The Cabin in the Woods and Kong Skull Island. So that's really cool. I was really excited to read this. I picked this up on a table with a ton of other books, kind of one of those like buy two get one free sort of situations, and I had never heard of Tim Lebbon, and I was like, I don't know who this horror writer is. I thought I knew most of them, but I didn't know him, which shame on me. So I want to read the back of the book real quick for you. Let's see, we have deadly artifacts. There's an underground black market for arcane things. Akin to the trade in rhino horns or tiger's bones, this network traffics in remains of griffins, fairies, goblins, and other fantastic creatures. When her fiancé, Vince, goes missing, Angela Go, an American criminology student, discovers that he was a part of the secretive trade. It's a big money business, shadowy, brutal, and sometimes fatal. As the trail leads her deeper into London's dark side, she crosses paths with a crime lord whose life is dedicated to collecting such relics. Then Angela discovers that some of these relics aren't as ancient as they seem. Some of them are fresh. So, sounds good, right? And as far as I can tell, this book came out in March of 2017, and I think it's the first in a trilogy, because based on the opening flap here where it kind of tells you other things that he has written, it says the Relics trilogy and Borderland and The Lonely are forthcoming. So I was excited. Start a trilogy. This is going to be good. Let me just have a sip of my tea. So, first of all, I want to say that I appreciated this book for its kind of lighthearted opening, if you will. It's quick establishment of a relationship between the two main characters, Angela and her boyfriend, Vince. I like that when Vince does go missing, she has a reason then to kind of to take on this quest, because so often I find in kind of urban fantasy things, it's like at any time you could just stop, you could leave the haunted house, there are things that you can do sometimes to get out of horror situations or even fantastical situations, and I like that she had a couple of reasonable motivators to go hunting for him. One, he's her fiance, and they were in such deep and true love that they just knew they were meant for each other. So when he goes missing, despite the fact that she gets all these notes saying, don't come look for me, blah, 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 she's going to do it anyway. And the other thing is she's a researcher. So, and her research is basically into the world of the nefarious and the dangerous. So she obviously has a natural curiosity about dark things. So I understood when she was going on this quest to go find her fiance. I'm with her, we can do this. And she's got the curiosity and kind of the innate desire to want to learn more once she starts diving into this world and discovers that behind the curtain are a couple of really ugly players. And honestly though, it kind of commits a really carnal sin. It's dull. It took a lot for me to kind of get through this book. I think I posted the poll for my patrons last month, kind of mid-month, and I was already reading this book. I will confess I have skimmed the last portion of it because I found myself not very emotionally involved. And I find, and there's a lot of things that kind of fundamentally in the writing that's kind of attributed to this. One, the perspective that you're in for the most of the book is Angela's. Now, I totally understand this because she's the one who doesn't know anything. So in theory, the reader is going along with her and traveling on this journey with her because you want to kind of see how things are revealed. But at the same time, she keeps meeting all these fantastic people and all these really interesting players, and you get snippets of their point of view, but I didn't get enough for me to really feel inspired or maybe connected. I find this in a lot of horror novels. Not all of them, but a lot of horror novels. It's not that they're too much telling, not enough showing. We've talked about that before on this channel before, where sometimes when writing, when you tell what happens as opposed to engaging the reader in dialogue and sensory impressions and that sort of thing so that you can really feel what's happening as opposed to just kind of being told what goes on. There's plenty of showing in this book. They don't just tell you, they actually engage and show you, but it's still kind of like you're just being talked at. And there's really some fantastic creatures, and fantastic, by fantastic I both mean well written and interesting, but also literally fantastical in here. And you just don't get enough of them, which was kind of frustrating. And the thing that really started I kind of gave up on the book, there's a scene where she's already met one bad guy, the crime boss that the back of the cover kind of references. She's met him, and you're like, okay, well, whatever. And I like the fact that she did have good reasons and machinations for getting to him because of her research into the kind of seedy underbelly of the world and also of London, where this book takes place. She kind of knew how to get to him. So I can respect that. And he was I was like, okay, he's kind of very stereotypical crime bossy. I was like, whatever. Well, then she meets another player in this arena, and this particular player has a live creature. This is where she first realizes they're living creatures, not just relics that are, old and decayed and forgotten. But then you go into the room, and the woman says, and here's my creature, and you get to look at it, and then it's cutscene in a different perspective. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to worry about that because they're going to go back and we're going to see more. No, you don't get to see any more in that particular interaction. They just go in, they pick up in like a living room talking about it, and she kind of has a couple of flashbacks about what she saw. And I'm like, the most interesting parts about this book are the fantastic. That's why people kind of, well, okay, I don't know about people, but that's why I read fantasy and horror novels and that sort of thing. It's like, I want to know about the creepy. I want to walk with it. I want to learn about it. I want to know about their culture. I want to know where they are. I mean, and for that, I am grateful that there is one character. Unfortunately, I think it's Lilu. That's how I say it. I'm not entirely sure that's how it's actually pronounced, but she is I guess she's a nymph, I think. Pretty sure. But you do get her perspective, and I will say this, her perspective is one of the most interesting in the entire book, and she has, other fantastical creature friends, and you do meet them through her, and so that's all very interesting. But then I wasn't really moved. I was kind of, by the time we're getting to the climax of the book, I was just kind of flipping through pages, trying to get through it. I kind of just sort of wanted to be done. And also, I have to say this, in addition to not making emotional connections with the characters and the prose not dragging me in emotionally, I also have to say that this book was very hard for me in much the same way that I think Hellboy 2, the movie, was difficult for me to watch. And any other of the movies or books and that kind of thing that play on the trope, Lord of the Rings was another great one where, all the elves are leaving, or all of the fantastical creatures are dying out, or there's only one left here or there, and that kind of thing. If there's so much of that in the book and whatever, it makes me so sad that it's very difficult for me to kind of overcome that. And I know that sounds silly, but just hearing over and over again about how these relics are dead and how everything is dying and everybody is in hiding and all of this, and maybe in the next two books, which I may or may not read, we'll see, but maybe in the next two books they have this sort of resurgence, which is good, which would be lovely to watch and to read about, just because, you kind of, I don't know, I always end up rooting for the fantasy creatures, even if they're trying to take out the human race, because sometimes they make a point. Anyway, neither here nor there, kind of a sidetrack, but Another issue about just while we're talking about the structure of the book, there is a prologue, and in my writing, and the editors I've worked with, anytime I have a prologue, they immediately cut it because prologues are kind of a semi-outdated or perhaps on deemed kind of an unnecessary portion of a book a lot of the time. It depends on what it says, and it depends on what's going on. And in this one, on one hand, I kind of liked it because it does set up and put you in action very quickly. It's Angela at the police station talking about how Vince is dead and how this mayhem and chaos has happened, and she's covered in blood, and she's obviously been through, she's seen some stuff. But on the other hand, you know she lives. So the fact that you've got all these multiple perspectives, then you've got Vince's point of view, you've got the fantastic creatures' point of view, you've got Angela's perspective. You know that Angela and some of the fantastic creatures live, so it's kind of takes some of that suspense out of it a little bit. Not that I can really talk, because honestly, with pretty much any book I read the first few bits, and I will flip to the end to see what characters live, because I don't like to read in suspense a lot of the times. I know, it kind of goes against I want to know as little about a book as possible while I'm going through it and kind of let it develop. But if I meet a character that I'm immediately like, ooh, I really need to know if this person lives, because if I get to the end of the book and they're dead, I'm going to be really ticked off. Sometimes I will flip to the end. And in this case I did, and so I sort of knew how the ending was going to play out. And then when I was reading the book, I was like, okay, it's almost sort of a little obvious. And some of it felt very movie-like, but maybe not tropes that I was really intrigued by. I mean, the bad guys get the crap kicked out of them. It looks really bad, da-da-da-da-da. And then the fantastical beasts basically come in, save the day kind of thing. I don't know. It wasn't my book, per se. It was well written. I can't complain about the writing, although the descriptions of the characters throughout the book were kind of similar. It's sort of like there's a certain set of phrases that kept being repeated for how a person looks. And the other thing I have to say is that part of the premise of this book, of course, is that he does go missing, and Angela, the main character, finds out that he's been lying to her about all kinds of stuff, and she does kind of, I mean, maybe it wasn't as easy as I sort of perceive, but she keeps looking and she keeps wanting to find out more, even though she's got solid proof that I don't know, that she just can't believe he's the bad guy. She's in her hardcore denial, and her curiosity keep driving her. And I guess, that makes sort of amount of sense, but I sort of question the protagonist's motives here and there. I wanted more of the fantastic. I didn't make a real emotional connection with anybody. The scenes that I wanted to kind of extend and prolong and see more of, I didn't get to see. I wasn't very happy with the perspective we were in for the most of the time, because I really felt like when she did interact with the creatures that I wanted to know more of, it wasn't for long enough. I guess I have a hard time sometimes about condemning a book because I wanted more. I mean, because isn't that what you want a book to do, especially when it's the first part of a trilogy? So I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt there. Will I be reading the next two? I mean, maybe if they come up on the bargain bin. I mean, I hate to say that, but I because I had such high hopes for this book and for this author, and I may very well read other things that he's written that aren't in the kind of a trilogy thing, because one thing I have learned is sometimes an author, they have kind of their sweet spot, and it's kind of difficult to break out of that. Like, for example, Stephen King is very good at writing these standalone horror story, beginning, middle, end. Wow, you go through it with them. The characters are very well fleshed out. I mean, sometimes he writes tomes, but we're never upset about that. It's like we want more and we get more. And he's very good at the standalone novels. That's kind of his sweet spot. Now, he's written a couple of series. I know he's doing Mr. Mercedes right now, and that's really good. I've read a few of those. And obviously, The Dark Tower changed my life, and I love it. So, I mean, he kind of made the transition well, but sometimes I've read short story authors who don't translate very well into the full novel, and vice versa. Sometimes the novelist doesn't do very well in the short story format. Sometimes if an author writes only in third person and then tries something in first person, it kind of makes you kind of head tilt. So maybe he's good at the standalone books, or even the short stories or the movie adaptations, and this kind of challenge of how to pace yourself out across a trilogy and what to sort of lay the groundwork where. Maybe that's kind of what I'm feeling. I'm sort of feeling the growing pains with him or something. And for all I know, I don't think he's written other trilogies. It doesn't seem to say on the inside flap here that he has. I could be doing him a great disservice, or perhaps myself. And he does seem to have written several things in the Predator and Alien world. So, and I do know that those overlap. But I'm just saying, maybe there's lots of reasons for this. This book probably definitely could work very well for other people. It just didn't work great for me. I would give it about 3 top hats and a maybe on reading more. So thank you very much to my Moonbeams for voting and for wanting to hear about this particular book. Again, this is Relics by Tim Lebbon. This book may be great for you. If it is, please let me know and leave comments. I like hearing, different opinions other than mine. And it's kind of a kind of sort of a mixed standard bag. It is a good story. It is interesting. The characters are interesting, and there's definitely room to grow. Thank you very much for joining me today. Thanks to all of our authors and creators out there for being you and for putting the stories out there and for giving us plenty of entertainment material and things to talk about and think about. Always appreciative. And until next time, for the love of story, have a wonderful day.